Has Triston Casas finally arrived? It sure seems like he might have, as he had a massive series in which the Red Sox took 2 of 3 from the Mets for a series win.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Monday through Friday podcast on all things Boston Red Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast, here to bring you the latest in all things Red Sox Monday through Friday. Thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network your first listen of every day. Triston Casas had a huge series against the Mets. Has he finally figured things out, and has he arrived? Going to be discussing that on today's episode, as well as the bullpen absolutely dominating in the bullpen game 3 versus New York. And finally, Christian Arroyo's injury that was announced as to why he wasn't in the lineup for the whole series during the Mets games. So I'm going to be discussing all 3 of those things on this show today. Thanks for tuning in once again on this fine Monday to Locked On Red Sox. So Triston Casas obviously started off the season pretty slow at the plate and defensively. He's been benched quite a bit to likely work on mechanics of figuring things out, addressing his plate approach, maybe fixing some things. But he had a really big series against the Mets, and I was always holding out hope that he would be able to figure things out. And when it comes to players like Casas who are early on in their career, you do have to be patient because it takes a while to adapt to the major league level, the pressure of playing in major league games, playing at Fenway Park, playing in front of that Red Sox crowd. That all does take an adjustment period. And for Triston Casas, I'm inclined to believe he's starting to figure it out. He had a great series against the Mets in game 1, which ended up getting suspended during the 4th inning and was resumed on Saturday. He went 2 for 3 with a single and a triple, and then absolutely mowed over Max Scherzer on Saturday, taking him deep twice in that game. Then on Sunday, he went 2 for 4 with 2 singles, one of them driving in a run. So it's obviously, a small sample size to just go off of one series, but I do feel like he's been showing glimpses of this for a while now. He really has been showing a lot of improvement at the plate, particularly from a discipline standpoint, and being able to take more pitches and look more confident at the plate and be able to just be patient with it and not be jumping the gun with his at-bats. So I feel like that's been a progressive change that we've seen from him for a while now, but he really did contribute a lot in the Mets series and really showed that he belongs here. I'm hoping that it continues. Overall, in his last 15 games, he's been pretty good too. 5 home runs and 8 RBIs in the last 15 days. So if you take him and Jarren Duran together, you can really see that the two of them are starting to show, what the Red Sox really saw in them. And when it comes to prospects, it's always risky because you don't know who's going to pan out and who's not. But when they first called Casas up last year, I truly had faith that he was the type of player who could pan out. And based on his last couple weeks of play, it's really evident that somebody's working with him and he's figuring things out. And that's absolutely huge from this team, because for a while during this season, I was starting to question the hitting coaches, whether they're able to get the most out of the players, whether Fatsy is able to really work with everybody and capitalize on their strengths. And it seems like the offense, really started to click again, because for a big portion of the season, they were just not hitting. So it seems like they're getting that back, and Casas has been a big part of that. He is definitely one of the biggest storylines of the series against the Mets. I'm really happy to see him do that, because the more he plays like this, the more he's going to gain that confidence. And obviously, it's hard to say, oh, he's definitely going to continue this and he's going to work out for the Red Sox. But what you can say is that it's very exciting what he's doing, and showing that he's getting there, because once he has this full season under his belt, then it'll be a good indication of what he could do moving forward. And all we can really ask for is improvement. And I saw a lot of people on Twitter who were dumping on Casas for a lot of the season. But what you really have to remember about this is it does take players time to find their swing. And it appears like he's finding his, crushing 2 home runs against one of the best pitchers in the game. And granted, Scherzer is kind of on the back end of his career at this point. But I think it's fantastic for the confidence level for Casas, and defensively, he's shown a lot of improvement too, and making the right decisions on the field. There are still some times here and there where I say, oh, Casas, you should have done this. But in general, I think he's shown a lot of improvement in all aspects of the game. And it's been absolutely phenomenal being able to watch him play and feel confident and just see him develop that, because patience really is key, and it can be hard to be patient with players like him, but they need to go through the struggles in order to learn how they can improve and do better. So the more that he struggles and the more that he learns from those struggles, the better he can be later on. So whatever he's been doing over the last few weeks and really the last, couple months in general has been a big improvement for him and for the Red Sox. And if they can really get him on board with where his expectation is and where he should be, that's going to be bad news for everybody else, because if he is the first baseman of the future, which I truly believe that he is, and he can help win a championship for this team, then he's going to have to continue to show those improvements. And, you don't need to sit here and say, yeah, he's going to be one of the best first basemen the Red Sox have ever had, because that's way too soon to know for sure. But you can say that he's showing improvement. And obviously the Red Sox lately haven't really made it exactly clear what their overall vision is of when they plan to be competitive. Based on how this season is going, it seems like that timeline may be quicker than it came across like to people before the season started, that they're really in it now and they want to compete with the other teams that are fighting for wild card spots. And that's great. But they also still want to continue to build around their young core, which includes Triston Casas. And it's so easy to just say whatever you want about a player on Twitter and say, this player isn't getting it done. But at the end of the day, they are the players and they're the ones that are going out there and performing. And if they can block out the criticism and just go out there and play, then they're more likely to be successful. And I feel like Casas lately has really done a good job of locking in. And you can tell he works hard and he really constantly is trying to improve. So I give him a ton of credit. He definitely brought his bat to this series at Fenway, and getting back from the West Coast seemed to be good for the Red Sox, and it was a good bounce back series overall against New York. They need to keep up that momentum with Atlanta coming into town next. But overall, I'm really proud of Casas. I think he is doing a really good job of showing that improvement at the plate, and he'll still have his strikeouts, but they've been a lot less lately than they were at the beginning of the season. He seemed to significantly cut down on those, which shows to me that he's familiarizing himself more with the types of pitches that he should and shouldn't be swinging at. So that's definitely promising. This series showed a lot of promise to me, and I just hope he continues to move upward in the right direction. Coming up, I'm going to be talking about the pitching in Game 3 of the series versus the Mets, because for a bullpen game, it was absolutely dominant. Everybody took care of business, so I'm going to be going over that coming up next. We all love fantasy baseball. I assume you're a fantasy baseball fan if you're tuning into the show. Do you want to win more money on fantasy baseball? You do have that opportunity with Sleeper. If you want the chance to win more money with less picks, head to Sleeper, where you can win up to 100 times your money on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. There's so many options out there in terms of who to sub in on your fantasy baseball team or who to take out. I actually had somebody reach out to me on Twitter the other day to ask me if they should start Jarren Duran or Giancarlo Stanton, and I advised them to start Duran, and it ended up being the right choice because he's just continuing to smash. So obviously there's always those debates, but Sleeper can help you work out what the best option is for fantasy baseball and how to continue to win more money. Use promo code Locked On and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. So it really can help you figure out everything fantasy baseball related and help you put together the team that you really need. So the Red Sox were going into this Mets series kind of on a little bit of a low because they had just dropped 2 of 3 to the Oakland A's, who, as we all know, are a very beatable team and they should have been able to beat. So it was discouraging watching the Red Sox lose to a team like that twice. But then they came back and obviously had a really nice bounce back series against the Mets in which they really brought the bats. And game 3, there has to be credit given to the bullpen, who absolutely came out and shoved the entire game. Bernardino started giving up 0 runs over 1.2 innings of work. Chris Murphy really is a big story of the game, pitching 3.2 innings, giving up 3 hits and just 1 earned run. Winckowski, Rodriguez, Jacques, Martin, and Walter all gave up 0 runs while they were pitching. They didn't pitch for that long each. Winckowski only pitched 0.2, Rodriguez 1 inning, Jacques 0.2, Martin 0.1, and Walter 1 full inning. And that's totally fine because that's what you typically expect out of a bullpen game, is that each pitcher takes an inning or 2 and then they go on to the next person. And I personally don't want to see them do bullpen games like this as consistently. I think they need to acquire a pitcher sooner rather than later, which I've been saying for a while, because you don't want the bullpen to get too fatigued. But everybody who went out there for the bullpen to get today really took care of it. Chris Martin on Sunday was awesome, coming in even just for 1 out. And Jacques was struggling. He came in a jam and was able to get the last out of the inning. You can always rely on Chris Martin to come into games and take care of business, and that's what I really like about him. I think he's one of the Red Sox best relievers, if not the most reliable reliever that they have right now. Chris Murphy also deserves a ton of credit for his outing today. He pitched 3 innings and really carried a lot of the weight, only giving up 1 run, which was the only run the Mets scored in the game. So he was out there for a while, and he's still so new, so he's still learning and still developing. So for him to be able to get the types of reps that he got in Sunday's game was huge for him. He looked really good out there. Even when he had runners on base, he managed to get out of that for the most part, besides the 1 run that he did give up. So he deserves a lot of credit for going out there and doing what he did. And I think it says a lot about the bullpen as a whole. You know, some of these pitchers may not be able to pitch for very long. Winckowski, I would say, is a great example of that. He's the type of pitcher to me who's good for 1 inning, and that's about it. Once Cora starts to stretch him out to 2 innings or a couple more after that, he starts to struggle. So Winckowski, to me, is a 1 inning type of pitcher, and then you move on to the next guy. So I think he looked really good on Sunday since he had minimal work involved. And I think that's the best thing for Winckowski. He only had to come in for 0.2 innings. And that's a perfect spot for him. 0.2 to 1 inning, I think, is kind of where his max is, that he can be the most effective. And Brandon Walter, too, came in, pitched the 9th inning, took care of business with ease. So ultimately, the Red Sox bullpen held the Mets to 1 for 7 with runners in scoring position, and they stranded 8. So that really shows that, you know, the Mets had their opportunities, but the Red Sox pitching responded with all of those opportunities and really locked down the Mets offense. And that's telling, because you have guys like Joe Jacques and Chris Murphy who are still getting their feet wet and still trying to really find their footing within this pitching staff. So them having to pitch a little bit but not be relied on to do a whole lot is good. And I think with the cushion the Red Sox gave them, with all the scoring that the Red Sox were doing in the game on Sunday, it helped Alex Cora to feel better about putting guys like that into the game, knowing that some of them still are developing into what they're going to be for this team, which, by the way, Justin Garza on Saturday night, really? I mean, come on. Like, comes in the ninth inning with the Red Sox up 8-3, and it ends up being an 8-6 game. Like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't, disagree with Cora trying to put him in because they had a big enough lead where even though Garza was struggling and got sent back down to AAA, he still could have finished the game, most likely in Alex Cora's mind. And then it was sad that he had to pull him when they had a 5-run lead and put in Jansen to finish it. So he, still is not cutting it to me. Again, like I said, I don't hate Alex Cora for putting him in there because in most cases it should be a big enough cushion to finish the game. But for the most part, everybody who pitched on Sunday, you have a lot of guys in there who it's still, very new to them and they're still trying to find their footing. You throw Brandon Walter into that category too. So it was a good combination of pitchers who came out there, and Chris Martin being the one who comes in for a minimal amount of time but cleans up messes. It's good for a bullpen to have a pitcher like that. And Chris Martin being able to be that guy who can be called upon with traffic on the bases and come in and, finish the inning is great to have. And I almost wondered if he was going to bring him in for the next inning, but I like that Cora gave Walter a chance because these are the types of games to do that in when you have a big cushion like that. And, if they're still trying to fight for a wild card spot, that's great because if they, have a 5-run lead in a game like they did on Sunday, then they can throw a guy like that in there who is still learning and still gaining the experience, because if they give up a run or two, then that's fine because they still have the lead. And then if they start to really, really struggle, then he can pull them and put somebody else in. And I also think the good thing about a lot of the guys not having to pitch a lot of innings and Chris Murphy really going into it and just diving in and pitching for as long as he did really helps the bullpen in terms of having more guys available during the rest of this week. Obviously the Braves coming in on Tuesday and then they head to San Francisco for 3 against the Giants. So those 2 series could be tough. So being able to have most of the bullpen guys ready and available to still pitch is huge. And especially with the off day on Monday, it's a great way to take advantage of giving people that rest because the Braves are playing really good baseball. So that's not going to be an easy series. So the fact that the work was limited, even though quite a few guys got into the game to pitch on Sunday, they weren't pitching for that long and they didn't have to throw a lot of pitches because they all pitched really well. So that's really promising and it's good for the team because that means most of those guys will still be available. So go Red Sox bullpen. They totally took care of business in game 3 against the Mets. It was a great series win and a great bounce back. And I hope that the momentum continues against Atlanta because they are 2 games out of a wild card spot right now. So really got to win these games. Coming up, I'm going to be talking about Christian Arroyo. He did get an injury, and that's why he wasn't in the lineup all weekend against the Mets. So I'm going to be going into detail about that next. Don't forget to check out the other Locked On Boston shows. So Locked On Patriots, Locked On Celtics, Locked On Bruins, Locked On BC. Those are all shows that you can go to if you want to get the news about the other Boston sports teams. I personally am a big fan of all of them. I like to keep up with what's going on in the Boston scene with the other teams. So definitely check those shows out. A lot going on this off season with NBA and NHL. So it would be cool to hear the perspective from our Bruins and Celtics hosts on what's going on with those teams and their thoughts on how the teams are assembled at this current moment. And obviously, never a dull moment in football. Patriots football is right around the corner. August is almost here. So definitely check out Locked On Patriots as well and just keep up with the latest in all things Boston sports on those other shows. And don't forget that you can follow me on Twitter at Gabby Hurlbut10 and follow Locked On Red Sox at LO_Red Sox. And you can also subscribe to Locked On Red Sox for free on your favorite podcast platform. So be sure to do that as well and share the show with your friends and family, as well as give a rating, give a review, share your thoughts. I always love to hear people's thoughts. So definitely comment, reply to me on Twitter, and share your thoughts on what's going on with this team. So Alex Cora announced that Christian Arroyo was not in the lineup for the series against the Mets because he actually jammed his right thumb in the Oakland series. So he's been in a lot of pain. I guess he was considered available on Sunday, but to be safe, Alex Cora didn't want to use him. So I guess he's really been struggling with this. There hasn't been a timetable or anything like that, and there hasn't been an official announcement that he's going on the injured list. But I think, from the Red Sox standpoint, this is a great way for them to buy time because obviously that Tuesday deadline for Reyes is coming up. Before play on Tuesday, Reyes has to either be activated onto the active roster or released, and they need to make that decision. So by Christian Arroyo having this injury, that almost buys them a little bit of time to make that decision because they could, have another day to sleep on it, and then Arroyo might be better, and then they have to make a decision. Or they can move Arroyo to the IL and then activate Reyes, which I very well could likely see happening. Reyes was really good for the Red Sox before going on the IL, batting .303 with a .338 on base percentage and 9 RBIs. Like I said on a previous episode, I really like Pablo Reyes. I like his athleticism. I like his speed. I think he makes things happen at the plate. He's not a power hitter, but he hits for average and he hits for contact and to get on base. And I really like that. And he plays pretty good defense too. So I think he brought a good energy to this team when he was here prior to his injury. So I think it would make a lot of sense if the Red Sox come out with an announcement saying Christian Arroyo is injured and is going to the IL. And it's not something that he could come back from right away, because that would buy them even more time, because then they could activate Reyes, have him play and see how he's playing. And then if they like how he's playing, they can then make another decision about other people who might be on the chopping block. Kike, they could DFA Kike, and if they DFA him, it would give them a week to work out a trade for him, which again would be another buying more time type of move. So I am really intrigued to see what happens with Arroyo, because they could say tomorrow, oh yeah, Arroyo's fine, like he's going to be activated, for the series against the Braves, in which case then you wonder, what do they think about Chang? Do they think that Chang, doesn't have a good enough bat to be worth keeping, or do they think that his defense overpowers that because they need the defense for shortstop, which I personally said I'd rather have a good defensive shortstop than a good offensive shortstop, because the Red Sox are so stacked with talent offensively anyway. So you wonder, what do they think of Chang? So I think the Christian Arroyo situation is definitely interesting. I obviously went over the whole chopping block in a previous episode, so I don't want to go over the entire thing again. But I think this changes things a little bit, because it could really be a loophole for them to actually buy more time in the whole thing, because if they do decide they want to place Arroyo on the injured list, that could allow them to activate Reyes and have him get on the roster. And if he plays really well, then they can make another decision later on. So it kind of came at an opportune time for them. I think Arroyo really has been struggling this season. I had high hopes for him. I thought that maybe in the second half he was going to start to crank things up a little bit. So far, that hasn't happened. Whether I should be patient with him and hope that it happens, I don't know. Tough to say. I think this is more of who he is. I mean, for a lot of the time that he's been here, I haven't been completely sold on him. I think he's a decent player with decent defense, and sometimes he can get a big hit for the Red Sox. But overall, I don't think he's fantastic or anything super special. So I do think, by putting Arroyo on the injured list and activating Reyes, it should make the decision clearer and clearer for the Red Sox. I am a big Reyes fan, as I've made clear before. So I think that would be the smart move for them, because it would really give them a bigger sample size in terms of what they should do. And then if they do that and they see that Reyes is playing well, then it could really be costly for Arroyo or Kike's job. So somebody's not going to be here as of Tuesday. And that'll all be really interesting to see how that unfolds, because one of those players I just mentioned is not going to be on this team by the end of this week. So we'll see how it plays out, but it was definitely worth talking about, because the Christian Arroyo injury is actually big in this whole thing, because it seemed like maybe the Red Sox weren't sure what they wanted to do. So this could give them some more time to really figure out what they want to do and say, hey, let's just see how Reyes bounces back after his IL stint. If he's still being productive and improving, then we have some things to think about. So we'll see what happens there, but I am so intrigued to know who gets moved and who stays, because it's going to be a big week for the Red Sox when it comes to the middle infield. Thanks as always for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Red Sox. Please be sure to tune in to tomorrow's episode. I will be debating the top 10 Red Sox players of the 2000s. So check that episode out. A lot of players that could be on that list, but who did I include? Who didn't I include? Who did I rank too high or too low? Tune in tomorrow. A part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for checking out Locked On Red Sox and making it your first listen of every day. Catch you on the flip side.